The COVID-19 pandemic has so far killed over 227,000 people and decimated the lives of countless more. Right now, a UK inquiry into the pandemic is taking place to try and find out how prepared we were, what went wrong, and what we could have done differently. I'm Ruby Lavinia, openDemocracy's news and politics reporter, and I've been leading our coverage of the inquiry. We've been covering every single day and want to continue bringing you reporting from this historic event.
We all experience the pandemic in a different way. What we have to do is piece together from that the story of what really happened and learn what we need to do better next time.
It's been really difficult to watch. And, I have to stop at times. I get angry. I get really angry because I'm just like, can you just for 2 seconds consider the weight of your actions? And it seems like no one wants to.
The first section of the inquiry, Module 1, has just finished, and it examined how prepared we were as a nation. But could we have ever known what we were about to face in March 2020?
Where the UK was, in 2019, 2020, I was just wholly unprepared. Entirely unprepared. And it should have known it was unprepared as well.
For 2 decades, we've known that flu was not the only threat we faced, and that there was a global report in 2004 that warned about coronaviruses specifically. And in spite of that, we didn't add them to the risk register.
It's absolutely crystal clear we weren't prepared for a pandemic as we entered into COVID-19.
The closing statement to Module 1 on behalf of the British Medical Association is as follows. It is clear that the UK entered the pandemic with repeated failures in pandemic planning and preparedness.
Experts, senior civil servants and politicians have been called to give evidence to find out how prepared the UK was for the COVID-19 pandemic. Austerity, of course, also played a major role in this part of the inquiry. How much did it impact the UK and how much worse off did it make us?
I think it was George Osborne who was talking about, how prepared the country was from an economic perspective and talking about GDP and the fact that, austerity wasn't an issue because the GDP of the UK was increasing.
Economically, in a much better shape than they would have been if we'd not been able to spend that money.
Which I found to be wholly disingenuous and purposefully obtuse, I think, because it ignores a key element, which is inequality.
Matt Hancock, David Cameron and Jeremy Hunt have all appeared in front of the chair, Baroness Heather Hallett, but not all have received a warm welcome.
We're failing to learn the lessons, Mr. Hancock.
The day that Matt Hancock gave his testimony, he apologized and said, and I know many of you are not ready to hear my apology.
For some, it will be hard to take that apology from me. I understand that. I get it.
And yet, at the end of his testimony, he approached us. And the arrogance to come over and try to make himself feel better by apologizing. This kind of arrogance, though, I found very typical of the politicians who testified. And in my opinion, they're just trying to save their own skins.
All this just talking in circles just so you can shirk your blame, and the end result is my dad is dead. It just feels like it's for nothing because so much loss of life could have been avoided if people took their job seriously.
Seeing how David Cameron and George Osborne somehow suggesting that austerity made the country more resilient, that we'd been able to spend money that otherwise wouldn't be there.
As George Osborne puts in his statement, without our action, you could have had almost $1 trillion of extra debt.
That's after rafts of experts, health professionals, people that represented local government had all said it had done the complete opposite.
And over the course of the hearings, the inquiry has heard from numerous witnesses across a range of fields of expertise that public health and health services in the UK are suffering from a lack of resources, equipment and capacity, which impacted their ability to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Everybody else in the room knew it had had a negative impact.
The purpose of this inquiry is to learn what went wrong and how we actually address problems. And I don't think there's any benefit in equivocating and trying to dodge potential responsibility. Instead of just addressing the key problems is that when you underfund services, they're not able to deal when there's crisis.
Module 1 of the inquiry made it clear that the country's health systems were just not prepared for the pandemic that hit.
going into this pandemic, our health systems were creaking. The NHS already had long waiting lists. We already knew there were challenges around staffing and getting, clinical staff in. Public health systems had been severely challenged by significant budget cuts, but also we'd seen massive reductions in funding to the voluntary and community sector over that period. If you look at where we are now, we're no better prepared. Our NHS still lacks the resilience to respond in terms of the bed numbers it has and staffing levels.
The thing about Module 1 that I have to say is we have learned a lot, and that is the point of this inquiry, to learn. It is about accountability, but more importantly, it's about learning for the future. There are things already it's very clear we could be doing to prepare. We can't afford to wait because we will be in this position again.
The next module of the COVID inquiry begins in October and will deal with the decision-making during the pandemic. This is likely to be one of the most politically explosive modules, with the likes of Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings expected to give evidence.
Module 2 is going to be a big module, as it's about what the government actually did, the decisions they made. I think it's clearly going to be a very important module. I have I don't know if I call them fears, my doubts, let's say, about it, is that so many of the witnesses are going to be politicians. And one thing I've learned, in my opinion anyway, from Module 1, is that politicians don't necessarily have much of evidentiary value to add, because they seem to be mostly trying to avoid their part in the matter, their responsibility. They're trying to not have any responsibility for it.
What we need is answers. So next time, what should be the way in which we make these decisions? What should be the range of factors that come into your decision-making process? And how quickly should you be making decisions in a fast-moving situation? And that's really, really interesting.
I expect be very upset. I'll be angry. I imagine I'll cry. But I'm also hoping that there really will be a pursuit of truth. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster, but we'll see.
We at openDemocracy want to report on every single day of the COVID inquiry. Our reports so far have revealed how there was no mention of structural racism in any emergency planning documents, how hospitals had to race to upgrade inadequate oxygen machines, and how results of pandemic planning programs are kept secret from local councils. We believe it's important that these stories and revelations are heard by as many people as possible. But we can't do it without your help. If you'd like to support our journalism, you can donate in the link below the video.